Now sit back and prepare to be entertained.
Welcome back to the Dripping Bucket, where me and Fletcher and some random hostage that we pulled off the street has come to talk about books and writing and the horrifying catharsis of facing our demons as a human race, and also fantasy, because, you know, why not? And so for our last episode with Jordan, aka the hostage, we were talking a bit about his most recent book, the second of which is coming out, is probably already out by the time you're listening to this episode, so everybody should go buy it. But I'm really curious to like rewind a bit, because we left off talking about process, and I would like to know if it ever gets easier if you get to 5 books and 6 books and so on. Fletcher keeps saying it doesn't, and I keep asking people in the desperate hope that it does.
Fletcher has to be wrong.
But I bet it doesn't.
Let me ask
Yeah,
you.
Fletcher's always wrong.
He would definitely lie if it seemed entertaining.
Yeah, exactly.
He's just trying to discourage you. That's all.
Yeah,
Don't
I'm
worry.
trying to discourage all writers. I don't want the competition. The fewer of you out there, the less difficult this becomes for me. So, if you're writing a book and it's going hard, it's because it is hard. Just quit, go home.
And you suck.
Fletcher's
Be a
playing the
lawyer or a
long game.
doctor or something. Yeah.
Take an easy route.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Use AI to write your book. That's so much easier.
There you go.
No, don't do that. We're not doing that.
We don't want to have to kill you. That's why.
Yeah. But so for you, Jordan, you have a completed trilogy. It was was it in Spiffo? I feel like Skull's Black Universe was.
It
in
was.
Spiffo.
Yeah, it was in
okay.
Spiffo, but I got a reviewer who, as soon as I read their bio, I was like, oh, she's probably not.
Shit. Yeah.
And lo and behold, she didn't.
Yeah, it's luck plays such a huge part in that. Like, you either land with that exactly the right first reviewer, or you're you're screwed,
or you're done. Yeah, those are the two options. Yeah. Okay, yes. So I am remembering right that it wasn't Spiffo, but and then so that trilogy is completed now. All 3 are out.
It is. Yes, that's the Dreadbound Ode. Oh, look what I have here. That's the first book is called The Skull's Black Verse. This series is very like epic space fantasy, so it takes place mostly on a planet. Yeah, I love these covers. They did such a great job with these. That's Deranged Doctor Designs, by the way, if anybody is looking for their own cover designer. They're really great, really professional.
That's good.
I would highly recommend
it.
I'm sorry, I was talking about something and then I saw a squirrel.
So the trilogy is completed. How does that feel? That must feel really nice.
It feels really good, I felt definitely like a sense of accomplishment that was different from just writing the first book and the second book. There definitely felt like a bigger thing, obviously I think a lot of writers probably discover as they do those kind of milestones. I did in the back of my head think like, oh, I finished this series. Like as soon as I had finished this 3rd book, it's like gangbusters from there. Nobody can stop me. I'm going to be on the bestseller list. HBO is going to be making movies of this shit. It's going to be amazing. And that part didn't really happen. So that was kind of a counterbalance. Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Very important distinction. And I'm sure you're correct. So that was like kind of a counterbalance to it where I did feel like a personal sense of accomplishment. I kind of took a step back and was like, give yourself credit. That's fucking hard. Yeah. Like you did this thing. Like so many people set out to write a book and so many fewer of them accomplished it. And so many fewer of them, when, you look at it objectively, it's not that great. Then so many people like can't get through a whole series. So you did something good. You did something worthwhile. Yeah. And on the other hand, I also did in the back of my head hope.
We're not yet swimming in money.
Yes, I have yet to plate my toilet in gold, and I'm not fucking happy about it.
Yeah, it's some serious grade A bullshit. I mean, the money's supposed to flow towards the author, and mostly it flows towards the author's editors and artists.
I was told of a concept called minimum wage, and I feel like I have not actually received minimum wage for the work I put in.
I don't even want to try. I don't even want to try to calculate how many hours would go into that, and like how much further I have to go to even earn minimum wage on that first book.
And then you talk about all the other stuff that you're doing besides writing the book.
Yeah,
as a
not
self-published
just the writing.
author. You're creating websites. You're filling out countless forms for an ungodly number of random things. There's a lot of admin that goes on behind the scenes that I think most people don't realize. Even people who are wanting to become writers have no fucking idea what they're in for until all of a sudden they're like, oh my God, like I'm running a 99-cent deal on my book this week and I have to register for these 7 websites and each of them wants a synopsis, but this one wants it to be 60 characters long and this one wants it to be a paragraph and this one wants it to be a page, and you realize you have to write that shit for
if we were smart we would have all of that saved somewhere, but as we mentioned earlier, that's not a thing. That's not a thing
I almost always do have that stuff saved somewhere, but
then you can't find it.
I don't know where it is.
Okay.
It's like it's somewhere on a terabyte of bullshit.
You're one step ahead of us and yet in the same place somehow.
Yes, I get to write it over and over again thinking, fuck me, I've written this already.
I know this. Why do I have this overwhelming sense of deja vu?
Yeah.
So, Jordan, did you find book 5 easier than, say, book 2? Because book 1, I think, is always the hardest. But was it easier than book 2 and 3?
Book 1's the easiest, man.
I think that's it. Nah, book 1's impossible.
Okay.
I found I found book 2 or book 5 to be pretty easy. I had some like personal stuff going on with a sick relative that made it pretty hard. But I felt like the kind of the character level stuff, which usually is the main driving force between a novel, felt like I know how this works now. Like I know I need to get these characters and I need them to want things that conflict with each other and have goals that are like zero-sum goals where like they can't both win here. I understand how the pieces of a puzzle like that move way better. Definitely. That felt easier. I think when I wrote the Scald's Black Verse in particular, I didn't really understand nearly as well, being my first book, like the overall shape of what a story needs to look like to click perfectly. And when I wrote that book, I just didn't I followed, I did some research and I wrote it about the hero's journey or not about the hero's journey, but as a kind of a plot format. And I think that's kind of dated, honestly. Now I think that in today's world there's a much more rapid fire formula that you have to follow. So if you really do kind of follow that, people who love that old school fantasy can kind of get behind that rhythm where they know okay, here we're starting in the character's life before things go haywire, and then we're going to get introduced to these other elements, and things don't just shit doesn't hit the fan on page 4. And I really feel like a lot of people these days, a lot of readers these days, their tastes have changed, and so you need to be delivering something that hooks them faster. And so I think that by the time I got to book 5, I had really worked on that, and I really understood the mechanics of how that happened and how that could happen a lot better. The one thing that I didn't realize, so the second book in the series, Page Aspire, is kind of like a heist. So there's the basic conceit of the series is the sinister Thule Society is always trying to get these artifacts. It's very like Indiana Jones flavor, where there's this evil group that's going after some occult artifact, and there's plucky band of heroes is racing them to it. Well, in the second book, they have set their sights on a magical tome with the power to rewrite. I won't go too into it for spoilers, but they are setting their sights on this magical book that's hidden in a library, and the main characters have to do kind of like a heist and steal this book out from under the noses of a secret society of librarians. And so awesome. I set it in this magical library, and it's this magical book that has like world building rules around it and magic. You have to develop kind of like almost like a magic system for how this book and this library interact and everything going on with that. Yeah. And that part was way more fidgety than I was planning on when I wrote. It was more complicated than I gave it credit for when I envisioned the book. And so a lot of my revisions ended up being, not like character storyline kind of stuff. They ended up being like, where do I insert this information in order to make it feel organic, but also to help readers understand what's going on. That was,
but I imagine, yeah. I believe that, but I imagine the act of kind of triaging and troubleshooting your early drafts must have gotten easier after as much experience, because you were mentioning in the last episode how you've learned the fine art of letting a book be shit, and I do think for all that we complain, there is a lot to be said for the instincts that you hone when you're that many words deep into this craft and that many hours deep, where you can throw up a pretty solid framework it's probably shit, but it's a lot better than the shit that you used to throw at the wall, because you have this interior understanding of what you're trying to accomplish now. And that hope keeps me going.
Yeah, I think that's really true. Like I also try to kind of continually educate myself on this kind of thing. I like to read books about it and watch YouTube videos. And I think for anybody who is aspiring to just the nuts and bolts of what it's like to write a fantasy series, probably someone has said this here before, and if not, they fucking should have, because it's really great, is Brandon Sanderson has a series of videos on YouTube that are taken from some courses that he taught at BYU, and they're really practical. So I went to the University of Washington and got a degree in literature and creative writing, and most of the classes that I took that talked about creative writing and fiction were very impractical, and they just had their head in the clouds, and they were really like trying to talk to the next Pulitzer Prize winner. Well, guess what? None of those students were that person at that point. Some of them maybe could someday get to there, but none of them were that person then, and they were still kind of teaching to this. And I think that this series is way more just boots on the ground. Like, these are the things that you need to do to make this kind of story compelling, to make a genre story that has these otherworld elements in it compelling. And he's down to earth, kind of funny, kind of goofy, kind of it's really good. I would recommend it. But also in your everyday life, everyone out there should be trying to get better at what they're doing if they care about it, right? So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Speaking of, so how do you challenge yourself with the next book? How do you push yourself to do something different?
I imagine tackling the rise of fascism is
So like I think some people get really comfortable. They find something they're good at, and they just keep cranking that out, which is that's fine if that's what you want to do. But it sounds like each series, each book, you're like, okay, I got to try something different now.
Yeah.
What is it you're sort of reaching for? What do you want to try next?
Yeah, well, so the last thing that I did that I definitely felt like was a challenge to myself, and I was, definitely worried about whether or not I'd be able to pull it off, is the first book in the Dragonreich series, has a male main character, and I have written this book as a female main character, and so I have done that, and I feel like I'm solid at least at writing women, and this book though had a mother-daughter dynamic where it's mother and daughter at odds, and so there's kind of two female leads that have like an antagonistic female relationship, and tackling that and making it feel like they're really butting heads and have competing agendas without, making it kind of cliche and making it like catty and feeling kind of flat because it's shallow. It was definitely a challenge that I was concerned about. And I feel like luckily, as you talk about things getting easier, little segue is getting a team behind you of people who can point things out to you.
Yes.
And my wife is my alpha reader, Rochelle. She's fucking amazing. When I finish a book, she's always, I'll go polish it one more time and turn it over to her when I feel like it's presentable enough that I can start getting criticism about it. And she is honest. And that's the absolute best thing, obviously, that you can get as far as feedback on your fiction goes before you publish it. And when I put out the first round, she read it. She's like, I fucking hate these two. Like, they're just always at each other's throat. Like, Isola is such a bitch, and like her daughter is horrible, and like they're just too mad. They're just too mad all the time. They're just always mad at each other. And I look back and I thought, like I did the thing that I was afraid I was going to do. These characters are too one note. Like you don't have that bittersweetness of a mother-daughter relationship that has highs and lows. You just have all of the confrontation. And so I had to step back and I had to like smooth the edges of it and put in some moments where they connect in a genuine and sweet way, and then put in, different kinds of conflict, and then like take away just honestly, I had to be like, nope, nope, you're being an asshole there. Nope, she's
one
being
line
an
too
asshole
much.
there. Nope, she's being an asshole there. And then I read it again and like, okay, now this really feels like it's coming together. And then like it feels like this is actually a give and take between two real people.
Yeah. Test reader feedback. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I feel like that's such a great, like a microcosm of the act of drafting generally. Where, that first draft, we really have a kind of a tunnel focus on like beats that are really sparse, and we're hitting that nail because we've got a hammer in our hand and we're just hitting that nail into the wall. But it gets it done. And then once it's done, you hand it off to your first readers and you get to fix the giant hole in the wall that you made, and start adding in like some spackling and shit, and make it look like a book.
Yeah, it was really great. I think I'm genuinely like really lucky because I have a wife that enjoys reading, and is also the kind of person that while she's just sensitive enough not to make me take my laptop and throw it across the room, but she's also no nonsense enough that she will tell you when she doesn't like something, and that's really gold. That's what
it is.
For someone
it's a
to say,
skill.
This isn't working. Like whatever it is, she doesn't try to solve the problems for me. She doesn't say like, I don't like this, I want this, because that's not going to work for me. Like this is my creation, and I want to do this myself. This is my baby. But she will say like, this doesn't work, and then I can step back and say like, oh, okay, well I can do this. Yeah, that's fine. It's a great thing. And I also have other people. Sarah Chorn, I think.
You guys. Sure.
Yeah, Fletch uses Sarah.
Yeah.
She's great, helping me do a developmental edit, and then I have another guy who kind of beta reads and developing. That's Chris Chinchilla. I should not sell him short. He's amazing. And like with those three, I feel like I have my bases covered where I can send, and I usually send it in drafts, or I'll have my wife read the first one and give me the, because I don't want to pay someone before it's when it's still like a lump of clay. I don't want to pay someone to tell me it doesn't look like a sculpture. And so then I'll send it. I've actually done it in both orders, where I've sent it to Sarah Chorn first and sent it to Kristen Chilla first. And I'm not sure I have an idea on which of those ways works best, but it's great to have two views from two very different people, and you can give it to a person and then you can give it to another person after you've done the work of fixing the things that you agree with in the first, and then you kind of get like a like a 3D image of it when you can see it from multiple people's perspective.
Yeah, absolutely.
Receiving a test reader feedback and deciding what to change, what not to change, trying to figure out what is, good feedback or useful feedback. That's a skill in itself. I mean,
yes.
And the more readers you have, test readers you have, I think the more that skill comes to play. Do you have, how do you find that? How do you work at getting, conceivably wildly different feedback from 3 sources?
It's tough. I can't even really remember what it was about, but this was the first time that I had 2 readers that were kind of coming at something, the same thing, from 2 different ways. And like, one was saying, I want more of this thing, and one was saying, I want less of this thing. And that was a tough problem that I haven't had before, but I do feel like it really evolves your way of dealing with that. Like, for instance, when I wrote my first book and I got feedback on it, I was just like, no, it's not. It's fucking good. It's great. And it was hard. It was really hard to, I didn't say that to their faces, but that was going on inside my brain. You feel it. And it's hard to shake that little demon up there that's telling you, no, you're a genius. It's fine. Leave it the way it is. But it's not fine. It needs help. And the people that you've asked to help are giving you good advice, most of the time. But you also develop a sense where I used to like really struggle when someone would say something and I didn't really agree with it. And I'd be like, are you just being stubborn? You're just being stubborn. You should just do the thing. You're being stubborn right now. You're holding on to your darlings and you got to let them go. And now, having practiced this before, I really have honed my ability to, without agonizing too much about it, just be like, nah, like, nope, like, ooh, that's a problem. How am I going to fix that? Nope. But I do keep most of that feedback, but it really,
there's a lot of peace in that stage. It's just like, I'm here to make the story better. So it's like, yeah, whatever, just cut whatever. It's fine. Yeah.
You really do have to go into the editing, rewriting stage with sort of as little ego as possible, I think. Unless you happen to be a brilliant writer and a genius, which unfortunately, apparently I'm not.
I think it's little ego, but also a really clear scaffolding, or a really clear plan for what you want the book to achieve. Just, thinking back to what you were saying about like a reader wanted more and a reader wanted less of the same thing. And I think, to me, if something like that came up, I would want to know why the reader wanted less. Because it's like, if the answer was, this made me uncomfortable and I didn't like it, and that's actually what I wanted from that moment, that's when I double down and put more. And it's like, tough, you're uncomfortable now. Sorry.
It's very true.
But
something that I have
you have to parse that. Yeah, you got to parse that. Like, is that ego or is that intention? And and that part's tricky. Like, I don't really know how to tell people how to parse those feelings apart, except that it's always in the interest of making the story better.
Yeah, I think that's a really great note, is that a lot of times, maybe not a lot of times, but often enough that it's worth being aware of, readers will say like, I don't like this thing. And this thing is like, this person is like being too stubborn, and they're too stubborn. They're just being just a little too stubborn. Yeah. Well, you want them to be a little uncomfortable before the dam breaks. And that's what that tension is what makes whatever change there is feel so satisfying. And a lot of people don't realize on a conscious level that this thing that they don't like is going to become this thing that they do like when it pays off. And that's like a good spot to look for, a good spot to say, no, I'm not doing that thing, because that fixing this person, arguing with that person, is like going to undermine the tension that's going on.
Actually, I'm going to make this argument worse. Thank you.
It's a matter of fact. You can't tell me what to do.
Yeah.
Where are we at?
And I find, I was gonna say I find this skill. What you look for in a reader is this skill of explaining why they feel like something's off. Because it's like if they can tell you, I didn't like this because I felt this was inconsistent, it gives you a better roadmap to that, triaging those solutions. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the difference between good feedback and someone complaining on your manuscript.
Yeah, I've also discovered for a fantasy writer, I tried, I have a few friends that are great people and they love reading, but they don't necessarily love reading fantasy. And I tried to get a few of those people with some pretty mixed results.
That tracks.
Who would read the book and their feedback would really center around like very, very heavily. I discovered I don't understand what this terminology means, and I'm uncomfortable because I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on. Whereas the people who are fantasy readers are very used to the
trust fall.
Yes, exactly. Like, here's this term that you've never heard before. We capitalized it, so we're going to talk about this later. And then you lead into it, and then at the end of the chapter or the next chapter or whatever, you explain it. You have a moment of realization, and then you feed in the next kind of like world building mystery. And people who weren't familiar with the conventions of the genre really gave me a lot of feedback that's like, I think, I understand that I could make this thing clear, but to do this at this moment, I need to hold the presses, people. Let's spend one page downloading, let's talk about the history of this nation for 5 or 6 pages while we download the background. So it's important to get people who know specifically the thing you're trying to do. And fantasy and science fiction too are both genres that have a lot of conventions and tropes and stuff in the background that people who are fans of it are going to bring to the table that people who are not are going to be bewildered by. Can you imagine, your grandma who's never read a fantasy book and you hand her Malazan Book of the Fallen, she's going to get a nosebleed. It's not going to go well.
That is a really good note, that it's and not only within fantasy, but also be mindful of your own subgenres as well, and the pacings of them, and it's fine to mess with those conventions a bit, but I don't think the average fantasy reader or average fantasy writer fully realizes how much they're leaning on conventions and shorthands until, like you said, you hand it off to a reader that is not of the genre, and they're like, "What's this? And what's that?" So that's a good point.
And on that note, this seems like a lovely spot to wrap this one up. Thank you once again for joining us, man.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. This is actually really fun, and I'm normally pretty nervous about things like that, and I had a lot of good time. So,
cool. I'm really glad to hear it. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. Thank you so much. And hold on, let me overthink this. Yep. Yeah, that's the shirt for this genre for sure.
So thank you guys. I appreciate it. I had a lot of fun. It's great.
Yeah, and we'll have Jordan's books linked down below, and by the time this airs, that second one will definitely be available, so everybody who's listening has to go buy it, and the first one too, because probably the second one won't make a lot of sense. So just go buy all his books. It's gonna be great.
That's a great idea.
Thanks.
Hey.